Hey, so my name is Kyle Moon. I'm here with Wildside Nature Tours. I'm your Yellowstone guide. I've been working in the park on an annual basis for 4 years now, and I'm pretty much in there on a daily. And on my days off, where are you gonna find me? In Yellowstone. Back when I was in college, my parents wanted to get me a gift for Christmas, and I didn't know what to, I was like, I don't need anything, and they're insisting on getting me something, and I was like, how about a DSLR camera? Best Buy always ran like a good deal, like Black Friday deal on it. So I was like, oh, let's try that. And at this time, I was going to college at the University of Florida, and I was pursuing a degree in wildlife ecology and conservation, which I did get. And so, at the time, I was in an avian biology course, and I wanted to trade out my binoculars for a camera lens. And so I actually started out by using a camera as a tool to identify birds. And so that's how it really started. And after like 2 years of photographing birds and getting the hang of it and learning the birds, I got really good at it. As I got good at identifying birds, I noticed that I would occasionally get a good photo. Now, mind, this is all on auto because I didn't know how to work this DSLR camera at the time. And then I would get one of those shots, and I was like, you know what? Now I know my birds. Like, and let's try to get some good photos. And so that's where it really changed. And so I kind of had a different intent, and I ended up I had a buddy of mine kind of show me how to work my camera manually. And I'll never forget, it was with a cottonmouth, a water moccasin. And I took my picture on auto, and then he showed me in manual. I was like, oh my God, like this is a game changer. And then so from then on out, like I had a different intent. And so as a biologist, I worked for the FWC here in Florida. That's a Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. I was in the field all the time, so I saw cool stuff all the time, whether it be amphibians, reptiles, birds, occasionally some of our mammals, but Florida's all about a lot of those reptiles and cool, insects, flowers, all that. So that's where it really began. Um, and then I kind of took off from that. It's actually really funny because, I grew up here in Florida, in Orlando, and there's a lot of old people here in Orlando, and I see them trying to hold their binoculars up, and I always thought it was the funniest thing. And then I took an avian biology class in college, and it was with Scott Robinson. And interestingly enough, his advisor was John Turbord, and I got to meet him, which was a big inspiration. I mean, they were both very inspirational. Uh, and when I got to understand how birds function and how efficient they are and how amazing they are, and I didn't even know they were derived from reptiles. You know what I mean? So just really getting to learn and understand birds gave me a whole new appreciation and shed light on that. And we live in Florida here, or I did at the time, and they're just everywhere, and they're amazing subjects to photograph. Very challenging for some. Other birds are easier than some others. The smaller warblers and things. Try photographing a ruby crown kinglet, and things are all over the place. As opposed to a great blue heron by a pond, very different, right? But yeah, when it comes to birds, it was really that class. And growing up, I was always outside, always by the lake, always by the water. I made the jump to from Florida to Montana and Wyoming. We kind of make those, combine them into the two. Um, so I've really spent a lot of time learning the ins and outs of the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem, and you'll hear me say that because that I include Grand Teton National Park. Um, and so I've been guiding there for 4 years now, and it's just truly a whole new world. It really is. When you look at going back to history in the Lewis and Clark days in the early 1800s, Yellowstone is the one spot that still has all the wildlife that they documented. Okay. And and it's not just the wolves and the bears. I know that's what most people come there for, but there's over 200 species that actually breed in Yellowstone of birds. And so it really has a slew of so many different species. You get actual seasons. Unlike Florida, it's just kind of hot. But there, I've learned to really appreciate seasons, and each season tells a different story. And so for Yellowstone in itself, if you sit there and tell me you've gone in the summer, I'm going to tell you, have you gone in the winter? Have you gone in the spring? Have you gone in the fall? We have elk. We have moose. Have you gone and seen the rut? These things are absolutely incredible. So to hear an elk bugle out west, it's like the epitome of the West. Hearing an elk bugle, it's fall, and it's just an amazing sound. So it's for a lot of people, and once you go, you find people always return, you know. So it's a place that I fell in love. The community there is great. And again, like I said, you can even break it down into the interior and then, the northern range, which I look at the interior where they have all the wildlife. It's great, but the interior has a lot of the geothermal features. And then the northern range is like what I call the wildlife mecca. That includes the Lamar Valley, but you have things like Gardner. And so these lower elevation areas that have a menagerie of different animals that stay at lower elevations. So you get a whole slew of wildlife in Yellowstone. As a guide and as a photographer, again, I'm going to say, what season are we going in? Because that matters, right? I run tours throughout the year in Yellowstone. And the one thing that people fail to realize in Yellowstone is you can be there in the summer and people think, okay, it's warm. Well, guess what? You're going to need a jacket in the morning. So it's all about layers. So bring your gear, be comfortable, and if you're comfortable, you can stay out in the field longer, right? And this is especially for winter. Layer up, and layer up, because it can get really cold and it gets windy. And you can always take layers off, but you cannot put layers back on. So big pro tip there. But even in the summer, it gets hot. A lot of people don't realize that we're at high elevations. So for folks that are at sea level, it might take a minute to get acclimated, but yeah, usually cold in the morning. As the day starts warming up, you're typically shedding that jacket. And then if we're out during that time of dusk, when things start to get active again, you might be putting that jacket back on. My one tip, okay, for wildlife photography is understanding and knowing animal behavior, okay? Anticipation, that's a big one. Anticipate what your subject is doing. I see this happen on a daily basis. A photographer will come up and they see what they want to photograph and they take this A to B approach. As soon as that happens, you're going to spook your subject away. It's gone. And not only do you ruin it for yourself, you're probably ruining it for somebody else. Now, what you can do there is anticipate that behavior, get ahead of your subject, and let it come to you. Now, granted, when I say that, we got to follow rules of distances. But with that being said, that your animal is going to act naturally, and which is exactly what you want. So, like for instance, a fox. If you see a fox on the road, don't sit there and try to stop right next to it. Go ahead far enough, and if it's moving, it's probably going to work its way. Know what it's probably going to do. Maybe it's going to be hunting bulls, and so there might be a nice meadow there. Set yourself up, get position, and then wait for that. It's all about patience and anticipation. So again, I'm Kyle Moon. I'm your Yellowstone guide. Come out, we'll have a good time.